wall or half step is there so that you won't know it until you've mastered all of the lower centers to a certain degree. So for the most part, when you're growing up, you're usually in the 3 lower chakras. You may be in all of them at once, or maybe mostly in one and partly in the others. Or it could be a constantly moving, balanced blend or combination of all 3. This pattern is true of a person, a country, a planet, a galaxy, or anything alive. At any level of existence, this same pattern of movement occurs. Let's take a country like the United States, for example. This is a brand new country in an old world. Compared to other countries in Europe or elsewhere, America is just a baby. So up until the 1950s, the vast majority of people in America were in one of the 3 lower chakras. Not everybody, of course, but most people. Their biggest concerns in life revolved around power, money, materialism, houses, cars, sex, food, especially with survival aspects, making sure they stored up enough money to feel secure. It was a really materialistic world, but something happened. In the 1960s, the act of changing one's consciousness began to rapidly alter what was thought to be normal. We had the first psychedelic revolution, and while the world's governments quickly put the hammer down, the damage was done. People began to practice meditation and entering the higher centers. Now please understand, America was not the first to do this. If you go to an old country like India, Tibet, and certain parts of China, you'll find that at some point in their history, they moved into their higher centers. They, as a country, moved through the mirror wall. Recognize the difference between moving into the higher centers as a country rather than as a species. This is not a fully enlightened state. It is simply a more conscious one. As they moved through these higher 4 centers, they would have eventually came to another mirror wall after the 7th chakra, keeping the focus to this new realm and everything that they had discovered before. The thing about half steps, once a person, family, group, city, or country goes beyond the first half step, they're never the same again. Once they know that there's something more to life than what they had previously thought, they'll spend the rest of their life trying to figure out how to get back to those upper centers, even if they had just had a fleeting experience of these higher worlds. In terms of a person or a country, once it gets above the first half step, moving into the heart, the sound currents, the geometries, and spiritual nature of things, what sometimes happens is that they lose their concern about the lower centers of consciousness. They sort of stop caring about their physical side as much. You know, like whether the house is nice or if even they have a house anymore. They're more concerned about the information they're learning and experiences that they're having in relationship to the nature of each other and higher consciousness. You see it all the time with hippies. But now I'm on a tangent. So sometimes when you look at these older countries, they seem to be physically almost devastated because their whole focus is towards trying to find out what reality and life is like on higher levels. More connection, more communication, more family. An example of this kind of country is India. Once a country actually moves through the final mirror wall into the 8th chakra together, which is very difficult, mind you, their only concern is what happens after death, the next level of life. It feels to me like this was the case in ancient Egypt. And I want to briefly explain that because it's not what it sounds like. The country wasn't concerned with dying physically. It wasn't a mass suicide. Rather, it was about what's next for everything that they've learned. Branches were created and spread out and expanded and started forming new cultures and new societies with different groups of the world, merging and expanding. Those ancient Egyptians did all kinds of things to understand that process of ascension, death, resurrection, moving into the next levels. So much so that they had a 24-year preparation followed by a powerful dose of psilocybin, and into the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid they go for 3 days and 2 nights. Their primary purpose of doing this was to find the doorway and enter into the higher worlds, and then return to Earth, the physical reality, and show others how to live life with awareness and love, and how they too can move into the next levels of life. What a trip. You know what I'm saying? So, wrapping up this segment, you can see how this pattern applies at both a level of the individual as well as the level of a country, or even how it might apply to an entire planetary populace. And next time, we're gonna go even deeper. Till then.